just want to make those few points, and it's very, very confusing.
I'd like to comment on this. In California, decisions on conflicts of interest are ultimately made by the Fair Political Practices Commission. Individuals can choose to pay attention to their decision or not. That's up to them. It's not up to the other members of the deliberative body. Mr. Evans or anybody else is told that they have a conflict of interest, choose to sit here. That is their decision. It's not ours. We don't have the authority to make that decision. Doesn't mean I don't respect your concern or your point of view, but it is not our decision. As for your letter, if you have a copy of it, please hand it to a staff member, and we'll Xerox it, pass it out to everybody. You have one?
I have one, and I emailed one, I think, yesterday.
Okay, well, forget email, that's a thing of the past. Brian, could we get it copied and handed out to everybody? I'd like to say, I'd like to leave this point. It is not for us to deliberate conflicts of interest. It is for the Council of SANDAG to possibly give us advice, and she did in November of 2006. I see her walk in, actually. She changed her mind. We will continue with her advice. I did want to say something about the procedure. We will have a report from Jennifer, any comment from Alan and Paul. We will then have questions to Jennifer and Alan and Paul about their information. We will then hear from the public. I have a number of speaker slips, and anybody who wishes to address the Energy Working Group on item number 4, please fill out a speaker slip. You're not required by law, but we kind of like to know who you are for the record. If you're shy, that's okay too. And then we will end the public input and have a deliberation among ourselves with, if anybody can remember what Robert's Rules of Orders are, we will try to follow them. Donna probably knows that.
I do. But believe me, I do. And I just want to throw something out as we hear public testimony, as we begin our deliberations to the issue of conflicts, whether it's an advisory or a decision-making board. There is also a matter that this esteemed group probably would want to consider at a minimum to deal with this issue, to at least identify in their report, any advisory report, to the full board or as it moves through the process, to identify any financial interests that any of us have related to this project, and that information be made public. That is not to necessarily recuse or to force anyone to recuse, if that's what we've been advised under IPPC rules. But I think in the interest of the fair disclosure requirement and the public right to know, that it certainly would be helpful to understand who is making motions and what their position is as to why certain motions may have been made. So, and people can draw their own conclusions or not. But at a minimum, I hope as we move into this, anybody making motions, if there is in fact a direct financial issue related to any of these projects, that we would so state and make sure that that's part of the record and who's making the motions and what their financial interest is.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the staff report.
Some of you have seen parts of this before, so I apologize in advance if you're hearing it for the second time. Today, we're here after a couple of years of discussion, debate, presentations. These discussions began in December of 2005 with the SDG&E Sunrise Power application. SANDAG's Energy Working Group then began their deliberations on the Sunrise Power Link application through presentations. We heard from the independent system operator, proponents and opponents of the project, alternatives to the project, and others. We've also heard presentations on the BEAPS generation project and the TEBS transmission proposal from Nevada Hydro. We're now being asked by the SANDAG Board of Directors to do a final analysis on the TEBS transmission proposal and the Sunrise projects to determine their consistency or lack thereof with the Regional Energy Strategy 2030. This is the statement of the task that I just read. But again, the SANDAG Board of Directors has requested an analysis of 2 proposed transmission projects. The scope of the discussion and any recommendation that comes out of this group today should be to determine whether the projects are consistent with the goals, guiding principles, and implementation strategies of the Regional Energy Strategy 2030. And we put a note that's also contained within the staff analysis that no findings are made on the relative merits of the 2 projects. The findings are strictly based on whether or not they're consistent with the Regional Energy Strategy. Next, I'm going to provide a brief background on each of the projects. We've all heard what the projects are a number of times, but one more time wouldn't hurt. SDG&E's Sunrise PowerLink proposal began back in December 2005. In August of 2006, a new application for Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, CPCN, was filed with CPUC. Right now, the project is currently in the EIR phase, the Environmental Impact Report phase. The draft Environmental Impact Report was released to the public on the 3rd of January, and comments are being received until April 11th on the draft EIR. The stated project objectives for the Sunrise PowerLink are to maintain reliability of service, to provide transmission capability for renewable resources, and to reduce energy costs in the San Diego region. It is an east-west line, and if it's approved, it is proposed to run from the Imperial Valley region through to San Diego region. Some background on the Nevada Hydro TEBS transmission line proposal. An application was filed with the CPUC for this transmission proposal on October 2007. The stated project objectives are to provide transmission capabilities for transport of renewable energy from Tehachapi and Imperial Valley regions into California, to interconnect the Southern California Edison and SDG&E transmission systems, and provide a transmission interconnection for the NEEPS generation project. It's a north-south line with a proposed interconnect to the IID Green Path proposed transmission line in the Imperial Valley. The line is also awaiting a license from FERC. That's the federal arm of the proceedings. The EIS has been approved, which is the federal environmental impact statement. Moving back to California, the proponents' the PEA has not been accepted yet. There's been a number of protests according to CPUC records, and a pre-hearing conference with the CPUC has been scheduled after an amended proponents analysis has been approved by the CPUC. According to history with these proposals and through discussion with the CPUC, any transmission proposal proceedings will last at least a year, so we can expect at least 1 more year for the TEBS. Oops. Didn't tell me I didn't forward it. Okay. Next, the Regional Energy Strategy 2030. The RES 2030 promotes the increase of, not in any particular order, in-region peak load generation capacity, Renewable resources produced both in region and imported. Percentage of peak demand met with distributed generation. That's fossil-based and renewable. And increased transmission supply to the San Diego region, specifically from Imperial Valley to import renewables. The implementation strategies for the RES 2030 are included in your packet as well in the staff analysis. On February 12th, the Energy Working Group Subcommittee met and found that the EWG should recommend the continued processing of both the Sunrise and TEVS projects by the CPUC, as they are consistent with goal number 5 of the RES, which is to, quote, increase the transmission system capacity as necessary to maintain required reliability and promote better access to renewable resources and low-cost supply, end quote. This recommendation was voted on and passed 4 versus 3. There were 3 in opposition and 1 abstention. There was another motion that failed, different, obviously, than this one, vote of 2-4, 4 opposed, and 2 abstentions. The staff evaluation that you've all seen and probably have in front of you finds that both the Sunrise PowerLink and TEVS projects are consistent with the RES, though each project has a mixed impact on the RES goals. And we'll go through that now. This project evaluation matrix was developed to look at how each of the proposals either attempted to meet, did meet, or did not meet the goals of the regional energy strategy. Goal number 2, the first one we have listed there, is with regard to in-region generation assumptions. The goal is that 65% of generation will be met in region by 2010, and 75% of generation will be met in region by 2020. You see we have a minus mark there. The in-region generation assumptions right now are that Otay Mesa Power Plant will be online, that the South Bay Power Plant will remain in service, and the Encina Power Station and San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station will stay online. Minus energy efficiency, DG, and demand response, the long-term procurement plan for SDG&E says that there's about 4,500 megawatts of capacity in 2010, 3,300 of which would be in region. According to the long-term procurement plan, the demand forecast is about 5,000. So for 2010, the in-region amount would be 65%. In the meeting that we had, the subcommittee meeting on February 12th, it was brought to our attention that we needed to include the 2020 goals, and that's included in the staff report. And that's why there is a minus mark, because by 2020, it's not expected that the in-region generation will be 75%. For goal number 3A, increase of renewable resources. The TEVS agreement with IID that's currently underway is to move power from the Salton Sea area, geothermal, to a Devers substation, and that would interconnect this line with the ISO, bringing in renewable power. The Sunrise PowerLink proposes to import renewables from the Imperial Valley substation through Sterling and a variety of other renewable resources. So we put a plus there, that it may contribute to the goal. Goal 3B, if Goal 3B is 50% of the renewables would be from in-county. The reason there's a negative there is that if the RPS, there's the California Renewable Portfolio Standard, which requires that 20% of all load is met through renewables by 2010. If the RPS is met by 2010, there may not be an incentive to produce in-region renewables if they're all coming from out of region. So there is the potential there that if the RPS is met, then this goal may not be met.
May I ask you a question?
Could you wait until she's finished?
Goal number 4 is with regard to increase of DG, or distributed generation, to meet reliability needs. There will need to be in-region generation. Neither proposal discourages distributed generation, nor do they encourage it, so we left that as a no impact on goal. For goal number 5, it is to increase transmission capacity for better reliability, better access to renewables, and low-cost supply. Both of the lines propose to increase transmission capacity and therefore renewable capacity from the Imperial Valley and Mexico, and they do that through providing access to an Imperial Valley interconnection. The action item and next steps for this group is to review the staff recommendation, which hopefully everyone did before the meeting, and determine whether the projects are consistent with the Regional Energy Strategy 2030. The analysis and EWG recommendation will be presented to the SANDAG Regional Planning Committee and Board of Directors. And some questions to ponder while we were discussing the merits of each project are: will the attainment of one regional energy strategy goal impede the attainment of another? Something to keep in mind is that the Regional Energy Strategy 2030 goals are not hierarchical. They are next to each other. They're not one doesn't supersede another. And are the transmission lines consistent with the goals, guiding principles, and implementation strategies of the RES? Those are the only factors that the recommendation or statement should be based on. And this is a map that we can use for our discussion. It shows potentially where either transmission line would go. The TEVS would be north. It's kind of hard to read, but perhaps on your handout it's a little easier to read. The TEVS is a north-south 30-mile project coming from SCE territory into San Diego, up there on the top left. And then the Sunrise Power Link kind of goes up to Rancho Mosquitos area from Imperial Valley. With that, I'll let Alan and Paul make some comments.
Alan, you wanted to start with a question, and then if you have any comments.
It's just a point of information because I forgot. Did the 50% in-region renewables include private and third-party projects or just utility projects?
It's not specified.
So it could presumably be a combination.
We did not specify.
That was just a point because the private and third-party investments presumably would not be impacted.
Right, and that's part of the reason why for goal number 4 it's a 0, because distributed generation could be produced by private organizations such as Qualcomm without an impact on the overall load, and they may decide to do that without looking at reliability issues for the whole grid. Yeah.
So, Alan, do you have any further information if that's on?
Only this comment. The subcommittee met, as you know, we have as Henry already mentioned, had numerous meetings on this subject. I think we've given every party that has a position an opportunity to express themselves with the intent of, to reiterate what Henry said, allow all of us to establish a regional perspective. And the regional perspective, I think, has been pretty well put forward in that recommendation from the subcommittee, and probably that should be the foundation for our discussion going forward today.
Paul, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Alan has stated it sufficiently. What more can you say? I think we go forward in the discussion. I'll probably have comments as we move along.
So then I'd like to open up to the members of the EWG. Any questions you have, Jennifer, Alan, and Paul?
Just one clarification, and that is that on the goal number 2, I appreciate the staff updating this table to indicate that both of these transmission projects would be in conflict with that goal. And I notice it says may be in conflict as opposed to will be in conflict. But I had the impression from that table that was prepared a year and a half ago that it's pretty clear it will be in conflict.
In 2010, which is the first benchmark, the in-region capacity should be 65% of overall. So in that case, it does meet the goal. In 2020, however, it probably will not meet the goal if things go this way. That's why it says it may.
Just final clarification on that. I think that the reason that that chart indicates in 2010 that it still meets the goal is that's prior to South Bay dropping offline. And so the moment South Bay drops offline, we are in deficit relative to the goal.
Your questions?
Just for clarification, South Bay is under contract with San Diego Gas and Electric through 2009. So it will not probably drop offline until at least 2010 at the earliest.
Did the subcommittee discuss the amount of renewables available with respect to the 2 projects? Or was it a qualitative discussion in the sense that both projects would tap into renewables, but not which might tap into more renewables?
I think the latter, Alan. We weren't looking at specific projects and identifying the anticipated production generation from this project. Essentially, the limiting dependent variable there would be the capacity of the line. The capacity of the site of the line that's built.
Not the location of the resources?
Ultimately, I think the consensus was that there was sufficient room out there in the desert to not have that be a significant factor.
We also discussed the fact that the LEAPS project could access renewable energy from the north, as well as IID. They're negotiating now to accomplish just that. That they have access to solar installations in the upper desert and also in Apache wind installations.
And also at the meeting were representatives from the Imperial Irrigation District who testified that they were in the position to create geothermal for the LEAPS project, but to 100% capacity.
Rich? You were asking questions of staff. I think you did a fairly good job with the goals. Of course, everyone here would tweak it a little bit differently, but the other criteria the board asked us to consider were guiding principles, and that wasn't considered in your presentation. So I'd like to make sure when we have our discussion, bring up that aspect of qualifying. Let's have that discussion at the appropriate time. Absolutely. During
discussion to bring up anything. This guiding principles, if you wish. Okay, I would like to open it up for public input. I have a number of speaker slips. I'm going to do my very best to take them in the order they were handed to me. And, Mr. Madrid will act as the evil guide with the 3-minute clock. Ready? Okay, the first speaker slip I have is David Cates, representing Nevada Hydro. Please come up, state your name, who you're representing, and you have 3 minutes to address.
Henry, just a point of information. I just wanted all the public speakers who are going to be speaking and everyone else here to know there's a gentleman here apparently who's filming everything here today. He declined to identify himself or who he's filming on behalf of, which I guess is his right. It's a public forum. But I just thought the chair might, and the speakers may want to know that this is apparently being filmed by somebody for purposes which nobody knows. I just wanted everyone to know that.
I think it's American Idol.
Paul, you only hope. All right, that does not count against your 3 minutes. Anything Michael Shane says does not count against your 3 minutes.
I'll defer to Mike.
Michael will take his own time.
I'm David Cates. I'm with Nevada Hydro. I just wanted to thank the committee for giving us an opportunity to present our project to the committee. You know, we're just a small company. We don't have the same resources as San Diego does to inform everybody individually of the various aspects of our project. I hope we do a good job for everybody in the committee. And I just want to remind everybody we're available to answer any questions anybody has, and we look forward to your decision, and we thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Next speaker slip is Denise Morse. If I mispronounce your name, you get a chance by pronouncing my name.
Okay, well, hopefully you didn't mispronounce that. That's pretty easy. My name is Denise Morse, and I'm from Campo. And I guess I'm considered a backcountry hick.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
No, it's true. I own a shotgun, and I know how to use it. As an exercise physiologist, I could also be the person who takes your blood pressure when you're recovering from your first heart attack in the cardiac rehab unit. The point I'm trying to make is we hicks come in all sizes and shapes. After a fire, we are the people who witness the raptors with singed wings who can no longer fly. They starve to death because they're unable to hunt for live prey. We are the people who will experience eminent domain. We are the people who will have to negotiate with SDG&E if our wells are destroyed by the tower installation process, because SDG&E will not guarantee a well replacement. When it snows in the backcountry, we're the property owners who look the other way when you bring your family up and play in the snow on a property that clearly states no trespassing. After all, it's kids, and it doesn't snow very often up there. But I can emphatically tell you that we are not looking the other way when it comes to the PowerLink project. Over 200 backcountry residents attended the hearing in Pine Valley. Of the 60+ people who spoke, 95% of them spoke against the project in its entirety. Not one person spoke in favor of the project. During a break, Judge Wiseman commented to a friend of mine that he was amazed at our technical backgrounds and how well informed we were. My friend told him that you rarely see residents in the backcountry get involved in anything. His neighbor hadn't been out of his own house in 10 years. We're serious about fighting this project. Representing the Mountain Empire region through a coalition of 5 planning groups that represent about 8,000 residents, I would like to say that we've read the work with SDG and all of you to find an equitable solution to San Diego's energy challenges. The San Diego Smart Energy Solutions is a great foundation, but you have to read it for it to be of value. Backcountry residents are a tough, tenacious, independent group of people who are well informed about Sunrise and have united with the communities along the proposed northern route. Our first choice is to work to create solutions, but if we have to fight, we will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Laura Kopek, to be followed by Donna Tinsdale.
I'm Laura Kopek. I'm with the Carmel Valley Community Planning Board and Communities United for Sensible Power. The EWG is the only group in SANDAG that's qualified to address the complex energy issues before San Diego. And their most important charter is to implement the San Diego Regional Energy Strategy. Now, I understand there was a lot of analysis that went into this, but what came out of it was a recommendation in which there is really no guidance whatsoever. It's a meaningless recommendation. It's going to go through the PCUC process anyway. And saying that it conforms to a goal of regional energy strategy without addressing what effect it has on the rest of the goals and your ability to achieve that strategy is no guidance whatsoever. We all know that the Sunrise Power Link will undermine the region's ability to achieve any of the other goals of the San Diego Regional Energy Strategy, and I think that needs to be made clear to your board. Once we have invested $1.4 billion in a transmission line to import most of our energy, what incentive is there for cash-strapped governments or profit-seeking entities to focus on and do the hard work for local and distributed generation goals, local renewable goals, and energy efficiency and conservation? How can SANDAG also not comment on the DEIR? Sunrise Power Link construction will affect the roads and regional plans in ways that you cannot understand unless you review the DEIR. If the EWG is not evaluating the DEIR, who in SANDAG is? The case testimony and the DEIR make it quite clear that this is not the best solution for San Diego ratepayers, your constituents. It is simply the plan, however inefficient and destructive, that makes the most profit for SDG&E. It's SDG&E's job to maximize shareholder value. However, it is SANDAG's job to look after the regional citizen ratepayers. And this is clearly not the best solution for them or for the region's future planning. I want to remind you of the guiding principles that were brought up before. All energy usage affects the environment. Any energy policy or program must balance benefits and costs against the impact on the environment. How can you do this without looking at the DEIR? The region will have adequate indigenous resources to ensure reliability and stabilize prices. This certainly hasn't been met yet, hasn't been achieved, and it won't be if the Sunrise Power Link is built. Energy programs and policies will support economic development activities and the creation of new jobs in the San Diego region. In-county generation alternatives achieve this much better. The supply portfolio will be diversified, cost-efficient, environmentally sound, self-sustaining, secure, and reliable. The DEIR lists 5 environmentally superior alternatives. Some of these alternatives have also been vetted through expert testimony to be more efficient and less costly. I urge you to take advantage of the PUC's research and do a more thorough job of fulfilling your charter, because this work won't be done anywhere else in SANDAG. And San Diego's energy future is dependent on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Donna Tisdale, followed by Dennis Traficante. Donna, how are you?
Good morning. Donna Tisdale. I chair the Boulevard Planning Group. I've been elected to represent my community. I'm also speaking as an individual. I do have a full copy of the document, all 7 volumes, and I've waded my way through most of it. And if you've read even part of it, you know that rejecting this proposed project is the right thing to do. Reliability issues, the fact that the Sunrise and Southwest Power Link both will rely on one substation on the Mexican border near Mexicali is a blow to that reliability. There have been over 23 earthquakes in that area in the last month, and it is also vulnerable to terrorist attacks. In Mexico, the geothermal area there south of the substation, they're not required to reintroduce fluids into the ground where they withdraw like they do on the U.S. side, and they think part of that is causing those earthquakes. New information documents that Sunrise is not needed to move renewable energy from Imperial Valley, Baja, or East County. In October '07, Imperial Irrigation District adopted 2 resolutions to, quote, facilitate development and export renewable energy from Imperial Valley to Southern California coastal plain, unquote, creating up to 1,600 megawatts of renewable energy export capacity without Sunrise. In November '07, the Imperial Irrigation District broke off negotiations with SDG&E on Sunrise, saying, quote, we believe we can provide you and your ratepayers with an environmentally sound and lower cost alternative, unquote. Last week, the IID board unanimously approved construction of Phase 1, an 8-mile portion of a planned 35-mile transmission project near the geothermal resources by Salton Sea. They also approved funding for Phases 2 to 4, which will increase our overall transmission. Sempra Generation's December 07 application with Department of Energy for a cross-border transmission line and substation in East County, Tacumba, states the line will move up to 1,250 megawatts of wind power exported from Baja Wind and La Rumorosa. The new line will connect with Sempra's existing Southwest Power Link. They expect construction of the 250 megawatt phase 1 of Baja Wind to begin in late 2008, with 2013 as the expected completion date for the final phase. Southern California Edison has signed the purchase power agreement with Baja Wind for Phase 1. The Department of Energy application, which I have here, does not even mention Sunrise Power Link. They also do mention that on the U.S. side, they're going to have a substation, a loop-in station, and they have 2 other projects on the U.S. side, wind projects that want to connect into that for transmission on the existing line, not Sunrise. In yesterday's Union Tribune, Sempra's chairman and CEO, in response to a question from financial analysts about Baja Wind, contradicted their Department of Energy Baja Wind application by just disingenuously claiming that construction had not begun, due partly to inadequate transmission capacity. In the application, the existing power link is not mentioned. Can I have just a few more minutes since I represent the community?
That wouldn't be entirely fair to everybody else, Tom.
All right, well, there's one more contradiction with BLM and the Sterling Solar. Their statement to BLM said that the first 100 megawatts will be transmitted independently of Sunrise with a tap into the same Imperial substation. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you'll pronounce your last name.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dennis Traficani, Santa Isabel, and a co-founder of the Protect Our Communities Fund. What I heard earlier in February from the EWG committee was very upsetting to me. It felt like the Sempra SDG&E talking points. I heard mention, I don't want the lights to go out. Come on, let's be realistic in this room. The lights aren't going to go out. I heard about reliability. Okay, you add another transmission line in the backcountry. We've had 2 catastrophic fires in the last 4 years. Both lines would have been down, and also the nuclear power plant line. We survived the fires by having in-basin generation, combined heating and cooling in Mexico. That we avoided blackouts that way. I heard about renewables. It's a joke. I've been involved in this for 2 years, and there was 6 units at Sterling Solar. There's still 6 units. There's no way anyone's going to finance 12,000 or 36,000 units to justify a transmission line coming across from whether it's the South County or the North County. I heard about, I want cleaner energy in San Diego. Come on, I'm not wishing for you to have dirtier energy in San Diego. Don't wish for me to have dirtier energy in Santa Isabel, or how about Westmoreland and Brawley, and all the unhealthful conditions. Those Mexican Sempra power plants are just churning, and that dirt is going across the border to there. Why are you wishing for them to have dirty energy and sick children and adults and middle-aged people? I heard here in this place that there was going to be, I think you even voted unanimously to wait until the EIR came out before you made any decisions on this. And all I hear now is the Energy Working Group Committee is suggesting to the Energy Working Group to have a decision on transmission. What's that got to do? No one's even looked at the EIR, EIS. I went to every one of the 5 meetings, and I didn't see the most of you there. And I think it's time that we need to do the following. It's time to quit taking our lands, the BLM lands, and using it for the benefit of the utilities in this state. I think it's time that what we do, let's picture, I just put a solar system in and it cost me 30 grand, okay? And I'm gonna be giving energy back to SDG&E. What about this? What's San Francisco doing? They have low energy interest loans that are being paid to the individuals.
Can you please wrap up?
Okay. Low interest loans to permit people to get their solar panels up, and they pay that at $1,000 a year through property taxes that are deductible. That's how you're going to get more solar for residences. And the Bill Powers report didn't talk about that. It talks about solar power for the big installations. I'm disgusted. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Conklin, followed by Michael Shames.
I, Diane Conklin, Ramona, Muncie Great Road Alliance, an intervener in the CPUC proceedings. Good morning. You know, comparing one thing to another, say this is transmission, and this is transmission. Wow, they match. Isn't that terrific? Without guiding principles or anything else involved, it is really unbelievable that you would do that. And I hope you don't. The other thing I'd like to tell you right away is that you did wait for the EIR, and you know what the EIR says. The first two, the top one and second alternatives, are not transmission, okay? More than 1,000 people went around this county met, talked to Diane Grunick, the commissioner assigned to this case, and Judge Weissman, and hundreds spoke, and very, very few, a handful, were for this line. You ought to know that. During the San Diego meeting, when Diane Grunick was holding the meeting in the county, the Board of Supervisors room, Mayor Jerry Sanders and Greg Cox were busy releasing an after-action report on fire. But you know, they don't understand fire. They don't have the slightest idea of what kind of fire risk this poses, but the Muncie Great Road Alliance does. And I challenge any one of you to tell me that you've looked at our testimony, except for SDG&E, which of course has looked at our testimony. The Alliance testimony shows that wind is the key to the problems of great fires and to power line fires. The evidence showed that power lines are the only ignition source that is more likely to occur during high winds, and that power line fires in San Diego are 19 times larger than average. This is all before the last fires. Now I hope you understand that 3 fires, including the Witch Creek fire, which started east of Ramona and burned a Rancho Santa Fe, was started by what? It was started by a power line of SDG&E. And they'll try to make a distinction between the two types of lines, larger transmission lines and smaller transmission lines, but we'll have more to say about that in our testimony. Fire, 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 fire. People are digging out right now, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and physically. Do you know anything about fire? Shame on you if you don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Shames, followed by Mika Mitrovsky.
Hi all. Actually, I came today really just to answer questions, make sure everybody was talking from the same page. I looked over the staff's report and I can't figure out quite where they're coming from or the facts that they're relying on, because they're inconsistent with the record in this case, among other things. So I'm really here primarily to answer questions and give you information so you can make an informed recommendation. For example, I didn't see anything in this report. I haven't even heard discussed the fact that next month SDG&E is going to concede, and there's going to be testimony, that there are 2 alternatives to Sunrise that are going to be about 30% cheaper. That's about $300 to $400 million cheaper. That won't go through fire-laden territories. I haven't heard that mentioned. And yet it's coming out next month. Astounding. I'm astounded here that there's a suggestion in this report, and I guess your goal here is to determine whether the projects are consistent with the regional energy strategy. You propose the first goal 2, maybe you should turn to the chart, it's easier for you to follow. Goal 2, in-county peak load generation capacity. The staff determines it may conflict with the goal. It may conflict with the goal. Well, you look first at 2010, in which neither of those lines will be in operation. And SDG&E's presentation is that if Sunrise is in operation, there's no need for Sunrise. There's no need for South Bay. They're going to be closing South Bay. So has this group been presented by staff a calculation that shows what the percentage would be if Sunrise goes into operation in 2011, which is when it's expected to be, and South Bay is closed down? What's that number look like? Is in-basin generation going to be increased? No, it's going to be decreased. Now, let's look at 2020. No, it's not going to be slightly inconsistent. It's not that the 75% in-basin generation goal will not be achieved. It's going to be turned on its head. You're going to be looking at the most likely scenario, about 60% of the energy brought into San Diego in 2020 will be coming in from out of the area, which is exactly the opposite of what we had discussed, and we spent 2 years formulating the regional energy strategy. Increase of renewable resources. There's a plus on that one. Has staff presented to you the numbers and what it will look like if the Sterling project doesn't materialize? If 980 megawatts of power doesn't come in? What will the numbers look like then? What will be replaced with? Is there other renewables that will come in over that line if Sterling doesn't happen? SDG&E is not obligated. Is not obligated to use that line to bring in renewables if it's not there, if it's not contracted. That's not a plus. That's a minus. I can continue going through, except my time is going to run out. But in each and every single item here, it actually conflicts with each of the goals of the regional energy strategy. So I'm having difficulty figuring out what facts your group is going to be relying upon to make an informed recommendation. I will hang out here. If anyone has any further questions, I'd be happy to engage in any kind of debate or discussion with the staff. I'll win, because I know the facts. I know the facts. I have expensive consultants who I rely on. They know their stuff. But I will stop here.
Thank you. Mika Trotsky, followed by Raymond Lutz.
Hello, my name's Micah Matrowski. I'm with the Sierra Club. I hadn't planned on making comments today, so I don't have anything formally prepared, but I did see this article in the Union Tribune, and I thought it would be helpful to maybe point out a couple things to the Energy Work Group. It's called All Speakers Oppose PowerLink at Final Public Hearing. And as Diane Conklin pointed out, it is true that over 1,000 people attended these hearings, and in fact, the commissioner, the CPUC Commissioner Diane Grunick, who was listening to the people speak, said that this is among the most extensive public participation we've seen for any project. The article goes on to say that dozens of Sunrise PowerLink supporters spoke, and this means in fact that hundreds of people spoke in favor of smart energy alternatives to this unnecessary damaging line. As mentioned earlier, this body does represent the region of San Diego, and the people of the region have spoken. We have cleaner, reliable alternatives that will also create many jobs. We don't need this damaging project, and I respectfully request that you respect the wishes of the people you represent during your deliberations today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Raymond Lutz.
Hello, my name is Raymond Lutz. For a matter of disclosure, I represent Citizens Oversight, citizensoversight.org, where this film will be posted permanently. I am also a candidate for the 77th Assembly District, which encompasses both the Nahantza Borrego Desert area and the southern region, which is impacted by both options of the Sunrise PowerLink proposals. Glaring admission that I found from this whole process is an in-depth description of the clear need for the system. Maybe it's in some other document, but it certainly wasn't presented to the public. It would consist of maps of usage now and in the future, stating where the generation could be found and in what amounts, I find also, just as an aside, the distributed generation term is something that different people understand different ways. You talk to power people, and they think it means big plants here and there. You talk to solar people, and they think it means rooftop. Anyway, as this thing moved forward, the public was told that the thing is necessary, and please choose which option you'd like. For citizens to evaluate any proposal, a justification would be a standard part, but is simply missing. That makes you wonder why they're not presenting their clear justification for the project. Here, I don't see it either. It's encouraging to see that the vast majority of the public that paid attention now sees through this plan, and then we see that the power is being brought into Mexico through the Mexicali power plants, where it is produced with smog levels higher than it would be in the United States. I don't know the extent of the future plans of SDG&E in that regard. But then that power is brought quite far north in San Diego County such that it could be tied into the LA distribution system. So it really has nothing to do with San Diego County. The environmental impact report must be respected. We must turn toward rooftop solar and conservation to meet our needs. One good idea, I talked to residents in both areas that are concerned about loss of their property, and the beauty of the Anza-Borrego Desert is to start allowing people to be paid by SDG&E if they generate additional power over what they use in the year. What you'll end up then is people realizing a balance sheet for their rooftop solar that will make it viable for them to put it in. And as a result, you'll have a massive number of people installing these things, making communities like Borrego self-sufficient, and maybe even generators for the rest of the community. Therefore, I urge you to take a big picture look at this and not go after these single-minded transmission lines as if that's the only thing on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kurt Dowd, and followed by our last speaker, John Christensen.
Yes, I'd like to make the 4 points I made to the CPUC at the chamber meeting. The first of those is that the claimed $142 million of annual levelized savings cannot be supported by documented facts. The SDG&E presentation with slide number 9 suggested that the savings would come from not building in-basin peaking plants and instead importing renewable energy. Unfortunately for SDG&E, you cannot import renewable energy to meet a peaking need because there's no effective storage mechanism today that's cost effective that would hit a peak. So the implication is either that there are no savings or that they're going to realize their savings by importing dirty energy, environmentally unsustainable energy from somewhere else. I want you to look at their presentation and look at slide 9. Understand what it means. Read the fine print. My second point is that we are, without thinking about it, all of us in this room sliding towards an inversion of the generation paradigm which we've used for as long as we've had electricity. What we're really suggesting here is that we're going to import both peaking and baseload power from offshore, from out of basin, and import it. That's the concept we're buying into as we buy into this larger grid pattern. My question to you is, if we're going to draw our energy from the desert Southwest as proposed by the plan, why won't the desert Southwest want to build its plants in San Diego? There's some sort of missing reciprocity here, and I'd like you to examine that. My third point is that we absolutely need to consider the efficiency impacts on load growth. Every study, I've spent 2 months looking at this very closely. I'm a PhD in renewable energy and renewable resources from Berkeley. Every study that I can see shows that ameliorations to the current grid will meet the growth needs if we take into account the efficiency gains. And the last point I would like to make is that the most secure transmission is the least transmission. That actually turns the entire discussion on its head. I want to point out to you that the real threat we're facing is global warming, not outage. So the question is, how are we going to build our renewable energy system? That's a financial question. It's a financial question of taking, I'll be off in 1 second.
Can you wrap up, please?
Yes, I will. Taking the 30-year time frame that it takes to pay off renewable energy and finding a financial mechanism, which I would suggest would be a regional renewable energy fund and authority to fund the 30-year time frame that we need to pay for renewable energy. Thank you.
Don Christensen, that is the last speaker I have.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Christensen. I live in Carlsbad, and I am a long-term advocate of renewable energy. However, I believe that a project of this size has to be proven that that renewable energy will scale up. If it doesn't, it could be considered simply bait and switch, which most people consider as poor form. There's a lot of things going on right now that would, well, just to share a few that I'm aware of. Earlier today or yesterday, the U.S. House of Representatives passed legislation that would shift $17 billion in funds from the oil industry over to the renewable industry. State of California, there's an assembly bill pending that would enable people to actually sell surplus electricity back to the utility. This would basically be following my understanding of the German model, feed-in tariff. And if you look at a map, you'll see where southern Germany is basically on a line with our Canadian border. And Germany is one of the countries that's leading the pack in solar right now. Finally, technology. A company in the Bay Area, Nano Solar, Google is heavily involved with this. They are producing a material very less expensive than conventional solar. Their current production is all committed to Europe. I believe they're bringing it on for less than $1 a watt. Those three things, there's lots of other things going on that I'm not aware of, but just to share that. To summarize, last statement, I personally am much more interested in providing distributed generation to the people rather than providing profit to a few.
Thank you very much. That was the last speaker sip. If nobody else who wishes to speak, I will close the public input. Begin discussion among the EWG members. In order to perhaps set the stage for that, I've made a copy of the regional energy strategy goals, which were distributed at the subcommittee. I didn't make enough copies for everybody, so perhaps you could share. Jennifer, can you turn off? Thank you. Okay. Nobody wishes to speak on this issue?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay, Donna?
All right, just to break the ice here. First of all, if I could get Mr. Shames to come back up to the microphone.
Sure.
I found your testimony very interesting from the standpoint of going through some of the goals, the guiding principles, and the implementation strategies of the Regional Energy Strategy 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the amount of time we have for public speakers, I would like if you could expand for another few minutes, because I think it's important when we look at specifically, and I'm going to try and direct you to sorry, I'm trying to find this, the goal number 5.
Okay, good.
We obviously, or at least the project evaluation that summarized the conclusions reached by staff, showed that the others didn't quite meet the contributes to the goal, and it's in the staff report on page 17, or at least our agenda packet.
Right.
And so we have that, for both of the projects. And the only one of the goals where there was a contributes to goal with the 2 plus marks was goal number 5.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could just, we can kind of ignore the other goals for now and focus on goal number 5. There's some specific goals in that, the increasing transmission capacity for better reliability, and I'm assuming that means better reliability to San Diego, but I'm not sure. Better access to renewables, and then low cost supply. So those are the goals of number 5. So if we could just, maybe you could go over those just briefly for us.
I could. Thank you for directing me. The language in number 2, where it says, where it referenced Imperial County. I have no recollection of that being incorporated into the RES. I'd love to be able to, I hate to rely on my memory, I'd love to be able to see it, because the focus of our conversation at the RES was on increasing transmission to the extent needed to bring in wind resources from the southwestern or southeastern part of San Diego County. That was pretty much the full extent of that discussion. And that's where we were going with transmission. But the notion of bringing power in over the mountains from other areas was actually ridiculed for 2 primary reasons. 1, as articulated by Ms. Conklin, fire. 2, as articulated by, I think, Ms. Tisdale, earthquakes. Earthquakes and fire make building lines over mountain passes very tricky. And that's why when we discussed transmission, it would have been focused, that focus should have been on transmission to areas where there's either wind or northern, increasing the connections to Northern California. Does that answer the question?
If I
I'd
could
love that,
respond
yes.
to that. Goal number 5, implementation strategy number 2, that's where the language about East County and Imperial Valley came from. If you want me to read it.
Yeah, I can go back to my notes and I can find that.
Well, it says complete the necessary upgrades to the transmission system to improve reliability and access to new generation in Baja California, as well as interconnections with renewable energy development in Imperial County and eastern San Diego County.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it.
Anything else?
Not for the moment. There's been some, and thank you, Michael. There have been some really good, very good testimony, and I hear a lot of testimony. I'd like to invite you to the City Council for non-agenda public comment to provide some intelligent comments to the elected officials. I for one, and I know my colleagues.
Just Michael? Or is there
All of you, everyone here was.
We'll tell Michael what to say.
I won't even comment. But the high level of testimony and the courtesy of the testimony was greatly appreciated. So, the next thing that I was looking at, and again just looking at the staff or the environmental working group subcommittee, and thank you all for doing that. The energy working group subcommittee, because I know it's not always easy. But the recommendation that was provided to us, which I'm trying to focus on that, specifically talks about the goal number 5. And I'm assuming, as far as the evaluation that was performed, that we also looked at the guiding principles, because that was on I think the second slide provided by staff. And so that's where I go to. I sort of look at what the issue is, try and make a determination on whether it meets certain criteria, and then how we would arrive at making those particular findings based on specific criteria, which of course has been provided to us. And so we have certain guiding principles that inform the policies contained in these energy goals. Based on some of the testimony that I've heard today, and have heard in the past, one of the guiding principles that seems really in conflict would be the energy projects, programs, and policies will protect the interests of the vulnerable and disadvantaged communities in the San Diego region in Mexico. I'm not feeling that guiding principle. I don't understand how this goal number 5 in the findings or the recommendation, how that meets that. Maybe someone could explain it to me, how that matches up. The other one is, when we talk about our guiding principles, that future development and land use planning decisions will reflect progressive standards for energy efficiency and responsible energy supply. Again, as one of the guiding principles that I would use in order to evaluate whether goal number 5 was being met, would be under the auspices of these guiding principles, because that's all I've got to use. I don't feel that, at least what I've seen, and in fact based on the testimony that I have heard today, I think that in fact the case has been made much more strenuously that in fact it does not meet that particular guiding principles under which I'm supposed to make this decision. The energy programs and policies will support economic development activities and the creation of new jobs in the San Diego region. I don't know, it sounds like a lot of it's not in San Diego, it's outside of San Diego. Maybe it does meet the creation of new jobs, but again, I haven't heard that argument made to support that guiding principle. The public awareness and education programs will promote responsible energy decisions by the public. I do not think that is the case, that these are going to help the public, or in other words, I don't think it has anything to do with that guiding principle, but I think we at least have to look at that. But I think that probably the one that, and I could go down almost with all of them, but I think the one that jumps out the most is the guiding principle that says all energy usage affects the environment. Any energy policy or program must balance benefits and costs against the impact on the environment. And I think that guiding principle alone is a strong enough guiding principle that tells us to say, which again, I appreciate the recommendation by the group, but basically all we're recommending is go ahead and let it keep doing what it's going to do anyways without us commenting on it. Because it seems that the process, there's no way to stop the process, and that's not what we've been asked to do. So I guess, unless I'm misunderstanding the recommendation, and it says that they are both consistent with the Regional Energy Strategy Goal number 5, but in order to say that, you would also have to say that it severely and greatly conflicts with the guiding principles upon which we are supposed to make our decisions. So, but that doesn't seem to be part of it. So, it's sort of like it can move forward. It really doesn't meet the guiding principles. It might barely meet one of the, I guess we're calling these the goals. It barely may meet one goal, because it wouldn't have been that difficult to take one of those little plus marks off for goal number 5 and say it may contribute, and then it probably wouldn't, And when you look at all the goals to see if it actually, when we evaluated the project, or at least when the working group evaluated the project, it hardly meets any of them. I mean, and I know it's not a hierarchy, and they're all sort of standalone things, but you have to take the goals and you have to use those guiding principles in order to perform that analysis. And I think that's where you start getting into, unfortunately, the review of the environmental impact report, because that's what part of our guiding principles say. So, all that being said, I can understand why it's kind of a interesting recommendation, but it would seem to me that if we are going to talk about those things that we believe they are consistent with, then we also must include those things that they are not or inconsistent with in order to perform a more full evaluation that talks about the principles and the implementation strategies. Because it's not just, at least the way it says, that the SANDAG Board of Directors has requested a certain analysis. We've given them one part of the analysis, which is one goal that it may be consistent with. But we haven't really looked at those other parts of it. So it would seem to me that we need to do that. And then to go back to the beginning of the discussion we had, I think it's reasonable. And again, based on the fact that there may, or according to counsel, that there is not a conflict of interest, a financial conflict of interest, because we are advisory, and I certainly understand that. But I do believe that it would be at least informative to those who would be looking at this recommendation, that the people who make the motions, the people who vote on the actions, would disclose any financial interest that they may or may not have with the project or the matters that we're discussing, because I think it does better inform the public and the decision makers who might look at this after we do, to understand what those individuals' roles were as far as would they actually make money if they voted to support a particular point of view.
Laura, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I agree very strongly with what Donna said, that if we're, we need to do the full analysis about what is consistent with and what it's not. Michael, can I ask you a couple other questions too? I mean,
I'll defer to the chair, sure, of course.
Because I think it's been raised a couple times that there's this significant vetting of at least one of the projects going on, and except for maybe SDG&E, and I think you and Diane and some other people, not a lot of us making this decision today have been participating in the a lot of information that's been coming out on that. And I just want to ask you a few things, you can just say true or false or whatever you want, about things that I've heard that have come out of that. One is that there is some amount of renewable, if there was a bunch of renewable energy in Imperial County that wanted to come here over SWPL, some amount of that could be done now. Is that true or not?
True or false, or whatever I want.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, true.
True. And how much is that?
Actually, the entire line could be 1,800 megawatts of power is available in Sunrise, and most, if not all, of that could be dedicated. SWPL, sorry. Thank you. And most of that, if not all of it, could, in theory, be dedicated to bringing in renewable from Imperial Valley.
I've heard there's some excess capacity on SWPL right now. Is that true?
Not a lot, no. But most of it is gas. Most of it is gas-fired power.
And then I've also heard that with some upgrade to either the line, something to increase the capacity of the line, you could add 200 megawatts to SWPL. Is that true?
I think SWPL is pretty maxed out. I don't think you're going to get it much above 1,800 megawatts.
So there's no upgrade to the station or anything that
I think there was a discussion about an upgrade to a substation or adding a substation, but that was really designed to bring in more renewable. I don't know. Actually, I don't know.
The staff report says, I think it says that one of the benefits and this is speaking to the distributed generation goal, it says one of the potentially beneficial to construct the transmission lines to allow increased dispatchability of DG. And I've heard that many people don't agree with that because DG can't be dispatched, right? So is that,
Well,
do these transmission lines help our ability to promote DG in the region?
in theory, DG can be dispatched once the smart grid is installed, which we haven't got there yet. But in theory, it could be. The transmission line, if constructed, will impede development of DG. It will not help it in any way, shape, or form. And the reason it will impede it is because money that otherwise would have gone to promoting DG will instead be
I think that's a very significant thing for this group, because didn't we write a letter ragging on SDG&E about you guys aren't serious about promoting DG? You know, didn't we do that? We complained to them about that. So I guess
Actually, we wrote a letter that was signed by the board of directors. I'd like to think we weren't ragging on them.
voicing our objections in, of course, a professional, diplomatic way.
This was in the analysis of their 2006 long-term resource plan.
I think
we
it's
noted that they were doing relatively well on all items in the regional energy strategy except the promotion of distributed generation. And we were told at that time, either by Dave or your predecessor, Bill Reed, that they were cognizant of that and they would be working very hard to change that, and we would see significant change in the next resource plan, which I guess is this year, is that right? So we'll be looking forward to that. But you're absolutely right, we have addressed that issue with them.
diplomatically asked. I mean, so I think that's a significant point, because one of our express goals was to promote DG. If these lines impede that, I think that should be significant for the group. I just want to ask you one more question, Michael. You don't have to get up.
Okay.
I mean, you've been heavily involved with the regional energy strategy, like a bunch of us were. You're heavily involved in this. Do you think these lines are consistent with the RES?
No.
Okay, I'm going to take the prerogative, since I put myself down next to speak, of making a motion to focus our attention. We have a second. We'll then be discussing in the context of that motion what we will be describing. I have some copies. So bear with me, I'd like to read it. You may wish to edit it. That, of course, make me upset. That's just because I'm trying. But I'll let you edit it as you wish. So here's the proposed motion. State of California loading order, and I will quote the loading order, although most people in this room have heard it ad infinitum.
Excuse me, more we can share.
I've made as many copies as I can. Down here. And maybe we can get some more copies, maybe Brian, if people don't want to share.
Do we need more copies?
Yeah. Loading order is quoted in a variety of forms. This is a form I found in the comment of the Energy Action Plan. Optimize all strategies for increasing conservation and energy efficiency to minimize increases in electricity and natural gas demand. 2, recognizing that new generation is both necessary and desirable, these needs should be met first by renewable energy resources and distributed generation. 3, because the preferred resources require both sufficient investment and adequate time to scale, one should support additional clean fossil fuel central station generation. Simultaneously, one should improve bulk capacity electric transmission grid and distribution facility infrastructure to support growing demand centers and the interconnection of new generation. And that is an ordered list, as it said, it's a loading order. Second, SANDAG's regional energy strategy, adopted by the Board of Directors in 2003, has 9 goals primarily consistent with the state's loading order. The revisions of the RES being developed in 2008 will use the loading order as a guide. It didn't exist when we first made the RES. And add goals on infrastructure, security, and transportation fuels. The first 4 goals, and goals 6 and 7 and 8, are more or less the loading order restated. Goal 9 is outdated. It calls for a study to be completed 4 years ago. Goal 5 of the regional energy strategy is this. We've heard it, quote, increase the transmission system capacity as necessary to maintain required reliability and promote better access to renewable resources and low-cost supply. Recognizing that the use of transmission lines to bring power to any region of California is the last option that should be considered within the loading order and the RES, It is the position of the SANDAG Energy Working Group that the two proposed transmission projects, the Sunrise Power Link and the TEVS project, also known as LEAPS, the SANDAG Board has asked EWG to evaluate. We conclude that neither is consistent with the full set of goals and guiding principles of the 2003 RES adopted by the SANDAG Board. The key word in Goal 5...
Henry, you don't have guiding principles of the text.
I don't. I put it in here.
You want it in there?
I'm allowed to edit my own before you go at it.
Just for clarity.
Okay. The key word in Goal 5 is necessary. We've evaluated, and the CPUC's EIR has evaluated energy resource strategies where increased transmission is not necessary. Indeed, in the PUC's EIR, new transmission comes in as a third choice if passed. EWG recognizes that the SANDAG Board may wish to interpret the regional energy strategy differently, and in reading Goal 5 may conclude new transmission is supportable. In that case, EWG recommends ordering the proposed transmission projects in any public pronouncement of the projects. By that I specifically mean, that is written here, any letter that we send to the PUC. Two projects both promise to bring renewable resources located in other regions of California into the San Diego region, and this is an important feature of both projects. Indeed, both projects promise essentially the same benefits to our region, with the main distinctions being the cost and the proposed route. The Board wishes to support a transmission project. We recommend that they support continued regulatory processing and decision-making on both projects. In this case, the SANDAG Energy Working Group recommends, in conveying a recommendation to the PUC, that the LEAPS project be accorded a higher priority for the following reasons. Number one, it has an apparently lower cost. It's primarily due to its shorter length. CPUC EIR assigns a much higher environmental priority to LEAPS, third than to Sunrise, sixth. The project is consistent with the Board of Directors' past support in the year 2000. The so-called Valley Rainbow project. LEAPS is essentially the same as the Valley Rainbow project, but improved in the sense that it has a smaller impact on the surrounding communities and the environment. LEAPS has the ability to transport renewable energy from our region from multiple sources, from existing sources in the Mojave Desert, and north of there, and the Imperial Valley. And the LEAPS proponent is in discussions with the Imperial Irrigation District for transportation to San Diego, energy produced using geothermal sources. I would like to respond to Donna's request, I would like to reveal that I am a customer of San Diego Gas and Electric. That is my total.
Henry, I have neglected to say I'm actually giving money to SDG&E as well.
So that is my motion. If there is a second, we can discuss it.
I would second that and acknowledge that I am not an SDG customer. Gasco, but I do take I'm assisting Nevada Hydro with some of their population strategies and compensate for that. So you have my second.
So there's a motion and a second on the floor. I invite discussion of the motion before a vote. Please raise your hand, and I'll try to take you in the order that I see the hands. Mike, you're agitating. Oh, you raised your hand. Okay.
Henry, I noticed that you have a cost assumption here on the line, and we've seen testimony that the Sunrise Power Link will save $140 million annually, and so we have a valuation for the Sunrise line, but we don't have a valuation for the LEAPS line. So I'm wondering, on what basis do we make an assumption that the LEAPS line actually is a lower overall cost to San Diego ratepayers than the Sunrise Power Link?
The numbers that I put down are specifically the numbers indicated by the proponents in their testimony as to the construction costs of the line. We do not have a way to evaluate the back-end costs and/or savings to the public at SANDAG. So I
Can we ask the LEAPS proponents what their what the net
Dave?
savings was?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. We purport to have the same benefits as the Sunrise project has. We cost significantly less to construct. $350 million, give or take, to construct versus $1 billion plus to construct. Given that the benefits are the same and the cost is significantly less, our benefits are higher, our net benefits are higher. And I think that's all I need to say. I don't want to get into a discussion of
That's a
$10
direct
here.
answer to Mike's question. The question is a very good one.
So we really don't have a number.
Well, we have a number from them, and we have a number from the Sunrise proponents as well.
My recollection, Mr. Chairman, was that at an EWG meeting here, a senior executive from SDG&E told us that they wish that they had constructed in Valley Rainbow, and that the savings to this ratepayers would have been between $200 and $400 million. My recollection also is that that project cost more than the LEAPS project at the time. So if we take SDG&E's executives at their word, then there's your figure. Yes.
So Steve, and followed by, I think I saw Rich, and then Dave. Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie, you were even before everybody else. Steve, you were following Carrie. I'm sorry, Carrie.
I too appreciate the comments from the public, and unlike Mr. Trafficani, I only went to 3 of the 5 hearings, but did have the privilege of hearing at least a couple hundred of our citizens speak. And one of the other benefits that I, along with Michael and several people in the room, have had is reading all the filings done at the PUC. And one of the things when this first came to EWG, Henry and I will disclose that I have no financial interest whatsoever, except that one of my clients that I work for is the Imperial Irrigation District, and they obviously have a financial interest one way or the other in either or both of these lines. How that affects me under this standard, I don't know, but I will make a dime either way. I wish I could, but no. But one of the things that I was concerned about when this committee was asked to make a recommendation at all is this is a huge endeavor. The Public Utilities Commission will tell you right now, and I'm sure SDG will back me up, this is the most vetted transmission project in history of the state of California, and the experts on both sides have done their best to get as much information to the decision makers as possible. And even at that level, I've read the entire EIR, EIS, and I can't tell you right now, I could give you an answer because there is so much information out there to be analyzed. I'm not sure, no matter if somebody in the public said they wanted us to make a decision, I'm not sure this group, even though we're an incredibly educated, well-informed group, could right now make a decision one way or the other, whether it complies with the RES standards or not. But one thing that the SANDAG board would have to do that the PUC doesn't is weigh the impact to our individual citizens. And something that hasn't been discussed, the city of Santee and the city of Chula Vista have both weighed in at the Public Utilities Commission because the preferred alternative number 1, in-basin generation, does affect their citizens. Santee is fighting tooth and nail the in-basin generation because they don't like where they're going to go and the impacts it's going to have in Santee. A lot of people want South Bay removed from the Chula Vista waterfront. So one of the things we're weighing is the EIR's sole purpose was to analyze the environmental impacts of each of those alternatives. It did not analyze individually for each city, which is the best. And that's the problem I saw when we make a recommendation and it goes to the SANDAG board. I wish, Henry, every one of them would take a regional idea and try and vote in the best regional manner. But when you're elected to represent a city, I completely understand that might not be as easy as it sounds. And so that's my concern. We can make whatever recommendation we want here, but understand the impacts from all of those 9 ranked alternatives will be very different depending on what city you are in. And as we heard, as Mr. Trafficani and anybody else that listens to all those presentations, the citizens up in that would have been the Sunrise preferred alternative that would have been impacted didn't want it in their backyard. And everybody thought, oh, the southern route would be great. It won't go through the park. It won't do all of these other things. Then when you got down to the hearings that were further down south, they said, wait a minute. We're going to see those towers. So it truly is a not in my backyard for every one of those 9 alternatives. And I want everybody to understand that. There's enough people fighting every single one of them. So if we try and do what your motion suggests, and I'm not at this point saying whether I'm going to vote on the motion or not, because I think I still, discretion being the better part of valor, will not cast a vote on this either way. I want people to understand that. The regional energy strategy tried to be regional in nature and gave us those goals regionally. And I think we got to stop saying the EIR solved those problems because it didn't. It just talked about environmental impacts. So I want people to keep that in mind when they're looking at your motion.
Steve, I think you were. when you start talking about costs between one line to the other, mile per mile, they're almost exactly the same. But still, Sunrise would give us $140+ million worth of savings. So, you know, this turns out to be the semantics of how you want to present your argument over and over again. And I really do feel for all the people who gave testimony, all those people who live in any of those other areas. But as Carrie so well said, we have to look at the entire region. Our businesses make money from SDG&E when the power's on. But if the power is not on, or there's not a reliability for power for growth in the future, it has a negative impact on our businesses. As hard as it is to say, and I'm not an elected official, so I can say this, the needs for many take the precedent over the needs of a few. That's not easy to say, but that's the reality of where we're at right now. Now, in the discussion at the subcommittee, there was no prioritizing one project over the other. And I know where Henry's coming from in this, because he's given us sort of that direction, you know, in the past. So to be consistent with what we discussed at the subcommittee level, I would like to make a substitute motion that is Henry's motion up to the last paragraph on page 1, and it would eliminate, in this case, SANDAG Energy Group recommends that in conveying a recommendation to the PUC that the LEAPS project be accorded a higher priority for the reasons listed on page 2. That would be eliminated. Okay, we have a substitute motion. Is there a second of the substitute motion?
The chamber would second that.
Okay.
And Henry, can I look at Robert's Rules of Order for a moment?
Certainly.
My understanding of Robert's Rules, and you know, I don't have it right in front of me, but the only thing that I am aware of that would supersede the main motion, which is what you made, would be a motion to continue. It is my understanding that under Robert's Rules you can't just change or substitute someone's motion, because the main motion, which is yours, takes priority over the motion, even though Mr. Salesi got a second. So just so you understand, I don't think you have a proper motion by Mr. Salesi.
Could we? As a student of Robert's Rules of Order, I can only say I haven't the slightest idea what's right.
There's a book over there.
Yes. Somebody know?
We have Robert's Rules here, parliamentarian on tab.
Well, actually, the motion is proper, so there'd be a vote on whether that would be the substitute, not on the actual substitute motion.
Okay. So before a discussion of the substitute. So we're going to take a vote on whether or not the motion from Steve, seconded by Mike, will substitute for the main motion. Can I do that? Can I? No. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Say no. 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 You better raise hands. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Can you repeat the substitute motion?
Substitute motion is precisely the same, but less windy as the first motion, except for the last paragraph on the first page. First page.
So is
And
it,
include the second page.
is it removing everything after, so this paragraph in this case, and it removes everything after?
That's it. No, just removes that paragraph and any reference to the LEAPS numbers. All in favor of the substitute motion, please raise your hand. All opposed to the substitute motion?
5-5.
5-5. Then the motion fails, and we're back to the main motion.
Can the main motion be amended at this point?
Yes.
Certainly.
Mark
says yes.
I'd like to propose an amendment that would complement Steve's motion, except that rather than to specifically identify the LEAPS route, that it would suggest that the preferred option represent the most efficient use of resources, including ratepayers' dollars.
Now, do we need a second on an amendment? Okay, do we have a second for the amendment to the motion? Yes, a second. The motion now reads that instead of recommending the alternative project, that the Energy Working Group recommends to the Board of Directors, I might add to the Regional Planning Committee, that the board adopt a position in favor of the lower cost project. Is that right? I hope somebody's writing this down.
I'm confused over that. I thought we were looking at the most cost-effective as the priority project. So, did I misunderstand you there, Ellen? Are we looking for the...
We can use the term lowest cost, but I said the most efficient resources and lowest cost for ratepayers.
So are we supporting 2 lines and endorsing as a priority the most cost-effective one?
We're not supporting 2 lines, we're supporting a line.
No. What the motion says is that we find both lines inconsistent. If the Board of Directors chooses to support a line, we recommend to them what Ellen has said. So, is there any discussion on the motion? Brian, maybe? Don't read the whole thing. Right? We already had to suffer through that, and I apologize. Just read the replacement for the last paragraph on the first page.
Great. So it would be, in this case, the SANDAG Energy Working Group recommends that in conveying a recommendation to the California PUC that the project that is the most efficient use of resources and value to ratepayers be accorded a higher priority.
Okay, so that's the motion. Are there anyone who wishes to discuss that motion? Okay.
Just a point, in this motion, on paragraph 3, you paraphrased actually goal number 5. That's not how it is reflected in the
I took it directly from the
no, it's not correct.
distribution.
The last 3 words, low cost supply, is not what it says. What the regional energy strategy says is competitively priced supply.
Okay, I'm sorry for that. I took it from the handout at the subcommittee.
And I thought that might be beneficial to the discussion about. Where did you get it? Right out of the regional energy strategy. On page 32.
Dave's point is absolutely correct. That statement should properly reflect that it's in the document.
We've got a document here in front of us that has the words low cost supply.
Where are you reading from? I've got my...
We'll have a moment's break for consultation with Robert and the regional energy strategy. Okay. While they're conferring, is there any discussion on the substance of the motion?
Henry, as soon as I can have at least 1/10 of the attention of people, I'd like to make a couple of observations and a discussion.
So they're both in there. There we go, I like that.
So Brian, you will put in the words that fit. That's too long there, right? Okay. Other discussion, either technical or, yes, Steve. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, Dave, you were, I forgot which order you're in. Do you mind if Steve?
I was at Steve.
Okay. Steve, since you did have a chance to speak, let's go to Rich, Dave, and Art, and then back to you if you wish.
I did want to bring up something I think the subcommittee missed when we took our prior vote, and that was the guiding principles. And Don has done a great job introducing that. And in my mind, the first and the last guiding principles are the ones that we kind of ignored, and they refer to environmentally sound and benefits and costs compared to impacts. So we now have the draft environmental impact report. And it pretty clearly says which project is reasonable and which is not reasonable. And that was not really considered in what we did before. Just looked at the goals. In fact, I was surprised to find the criteria included environmental principles. So I think we should make a distinction now that we have the insight of the 7,000 pages. And I do support your motion as you drafted it, indicating that if you want to go ahead and support a transmission line, that we give them the benefit of the draft impact statement results, which were significant for these two projects. One being modest impacts, the other being like the worst in the running if you leave out the pump hydro, which has nothing to do with transmission. And I think your word of as necessary is important. I mean, you know, they could be proposing 5 transmission lines, and clearly at some point it becomes unnecessary. And both of them connect to renewables. And I think the issue of, as renewables come online, they'll be pushing fossils off using a loading order. So the question of a transmission link is really one of a little bit of redundancy. It can be carried either way. And the whole idea of the loading order really is the key. We won't be using as much fossils as those things come online. So I'm basically supporting your original proposal.
David, you're next.
Couple of issues that on the proposal, we have listed a number of places the EIR. I think it's important to note that it's a draft EIR, comments, you know, in front of the commission this time. That's significant. And I guess I'm concerned a little bit about the 4th paragraph, where we talk neither is consistent with the full set of goals in the 2003 RES adopted by the SANDAG board. I'm just not sure there's an alternative out there, whether it's a transmission line or renewables or whatever, that will be fully consistent with all of these. And I think to say that these two are not consistent, it's going to be very difficult to find any project that's going to be consistent with all these goals. And so I guess, you know, a little bit of a clarification, is this, you know, just tied to the 2 transmission lines, or is it to all alternatives? So I'm just a little concerned that there's not probably one project out there that will be totally consistent with all 5.
I think that, if I may interject, you're probably right. And we were only asked about these 2. We are doing, in the revision of the regional energy strategy, look at everything. And that's where, and that revision will also go to the regional planning committee and to the SANDAG board of directors, which ultimately has the authority to adopt it. Art, you were next, and then Steve will come back to you.
I have to visit my probation officer at 2 o'clock. Comments before I leave.
Here's to you, Art.
Before you find out where this person stands on the regional energy.
You know, those of us who have been around for quite some time recognize, and this sounds very hokey, but the power really belongs to the people. I'm not talking about energy power, but the power really belongs to the people. And I'm very impressed with the quality of the individuals and the comments made before this body, not just now, but in prior presentations. Mr. Traficani has every right to be pissed off at us, because that's his prerogative, as is the prerogative of other people to take cheap shots at people, if you will, if you're in office. The other thing, too, is that I want to make sure that we take certain factors into consideration. You know, we talked about global warming, and that's a term that's no longer acceptable, because people think when you talk about warming, everything's going to get warm. So the term is climate change. And I'd like to strongly suggest climate change is a hell of a lot better than global warming. But I'd also like to suggest that we take into consideration the number of people who are now injecting themselves in the decisions that this body is going to be making before or even after it goes to the full board
And that happens to be that the Attorney General has told us in no uncertain terms, you guys stand by. He's already sued X number of regional agencies. Every one of us, and I sit on the League of California Cities board, the statewide board representing 478 cities. Every one of us are really scurrying around to make sure that our general plan has another element dealing with environmental concerns or climate change or anything in that regard. The other thing that we should keep in mind is that we're talking, today this is 2008, we're talking about 2020 as if in fact it were tomorrow. Just like the technology in golf, you know, every day there's a new driver that gives you 2 more yards per drive. In IT, there's a computer or a little Palm Pilot that even enables you to communicate with the universe in 2 seconds. I am convinced that we're not static. The technology that's going to be coming before us is going to be, probably some of it's not even being considered or developed at this point. You can't tell me that those brilliant computer geeks and wonks in Silicon Valley aren't focusing also on climate change, energy, and the technology that is going to be beneficial to the whole universe. So all I want to suggest, quite frankly, is that as we make this vote, it is, once we cast the vote, everything that we voted on is obsolete as far as I'm concerned from a technological standpoint. The other aspect too is that we should be prepared for a lawsuit relative to the energy, to the environmental impact report, EIR. That's a given, no matter what we say. And I defer to Kerry, who is a subject matter expert in this field. And I look to other people that I respect to set the agenda for me. And when somebody like that, with that much background and experience, says, you know, I'm not prepared to make a decision because I'm not ready or able or at least have a good feel for these things, I take my lead from her or anybody else who shares the same opinions. So I would make one comment in closing, that we also encourage anybody on this committee who wishes to make or submit a minority report, you should do that. And I also submit and I plead with you to come to the board meeting when this is being discussed, because with all due respect to my colleagues, a great number of them have already made a commitment as to what line they want to support. And the fact of the matter is that the hard work, and I really respect everybody who's been here, churning all kinds of energy, time, and commitment in the last 2.5 years, to be just summarily dismissed at another level simply because it's politically expedient, should be an insult to all of us. And I think one of the things that I have to remind ourselves that irrespective of what some of the supervisors say, there will be some more fires in the backcountry, and we should be prepared to address those issues as best we possibly can.
Steve, before I let you speak, I just want to remind everybody that in the light of Art's comments, I will be going a week from tomorrow to the Regional Planning Committee, which is the next step in the reporting structure of SANDAG. If you wish your comments to be carried by me, you can either come yourself or send them to me and I will represent you as best I can. That includes a written but short minority view if that's what you have. Steve?
Well, as the motion is stated now, the most cost-effective, LEAPS is going to win because they are smaller. They're providing energy too. And to say too that neither is consistent with the full set of goals, there is nothing that could happen that would be consistent with all the full set of the goals. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean that's prejudiced. That's a prejudiced component to this. Against, depending on your position, against both of them or the one over the other. I don't feel that that's the right way to do this. It's certainly not consistent with the subcommittee's discussion and recommendation that we had as well. I just don't feel good about it.
I'm sorry, I'm not on the board. I apologize for interrupting.
You are, but you're refused to join us.
I refuse to join, and that may change,
I
depending
don't
on how
want
you
you to
guys
think we
do.
take that personally.
But just point of information. One, yes, there is. You can, I spent almost $500,000 coming up with a proposal that actually is consistent with the RES and hasn't been considered by you and hasn't even been studied by you, okay? That's one. And two, yes, there may be not one project, but there are a number of series of strategies that could very well be consistent with the RES, Steve. So do your homework.
Well, as much as Michael spends, doesn't necessarily mean that he spends it wisely.
That was uncalled for.
Are there other comments on the motion? In that case, I would like to call the question.
Well, could we be clear on the motion, sir?
We could be.
Yeah, but may I ask that we do just that?
Okay, unless I'm mistaken, the motion is what is on the page in front of you, and Ryan, will you read the last paragraph again? There may have been some please.
In this case, the SANDAG Energy Working Group recommends that in conveying a recommendation to the California PUC that the project with the most efficient use of resources and value to ratepayers be accorded a higher priority. That's it.
That is the motion. Thank you. I will call.
Can we did we reject what Rich was saying about adding in the environmental impact? Or do we need to mean natural resources, air, water? What does resources mean?
Everything. Rich's comments.
Those are Rich's comments, but if
Well, then
Rich or
can
somebody
someone
wishes
define,
to provide specific
can someone
language.
define resources for me then?
Well, I think our
Or can we
comment
add
is
in the environmental impacts to make it at least
would you like
present?
to
Because
give
otherwise we're just saying.
specific language and precisely where it is, so we can go to the motion. Mr. Chairman, may be pushing. Yes, sir.
Let me just give you the concern that I have. Once we start being very specific, rather than broad, then they'll say, yeah, but you omitted this, you didn't include that, or whatever. So I think when we talk resources, I think an informed body of people who are going to be addressing that issue can read whatever they want into it, but as far as we're concerned, it's all inclusive. I'd rather do that than be very specific, because I can guarantee you that we're going to omit something, or some other terminology is going to be applied to. That's not a resource, that is whatever. I just prefer the broad approach.
But, and also, Henry, SANDAG board has asked us to not take that into consideration.
We don't work for the SANDAG board. We are here, as I said at the beginning, to tell truth to power. And it is our decision what we will recommend. We could have told them to take a flying leap, no pun intended, and that we wouldn't consider this at all. Thank you very much.
Actually, the Energy Working Group is an advisory committee to the SANDAG board, and it operates at the request of the board.
No, the Regional Energy Working Group was an independent entity that chose to become part of SANDAG to advise on regional matters. And whatever the view within the building, that is not the view of the members, or most of the members of this board. And I am proud it is an independent body that will choose to do what it wishes and let the board choose whatever from the advice that we give them, what they see as important and valuable. That's their responsibility and their privilege. Now, do we have specific language to address the point that Rich and Laura are talking about? I'll come up to you, Daisy, in just a second. Yes.
Henry, on the back page where you give the reason, are you still having the back page of why you want?
The back page has dropped off the motion because of Alan's amendment. Thank you. Dave, you want to?
Well, the words you've added, to recommend a project be given, is that paragraph 2, the bottom paragraph?
It is as Brian read it.
Okay, with
You can ask him to read it again.
with the low cost.
We'll see when he memorizes it, he's read it too often.
What was the phrase you added, Brian?
Project representing the most efficient use of resources and value to ratepayers.
And I have language I'd like to add, maybe, and has the minimum impact on community health and the environment.
Okay. So do we have a second to that amendment? We have a second? Ready to vote? All in favor of that amendment to the motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? Pass. Second. We did that a little slower.
Yeah, we're trying to write everything.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Don't speak so fast.
Do we have a clarification one more time on the amendment?
Yeah. And has the minimum impact on community health and the environment.
So, is everybody prepared? So all in favor of that amendment, please raise your hand.
Keep them up.
Opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. Opposed? I think the amendment passes. All right, and now I'd like to call the question on the motion.
All right, and then
Sure.
I just have one question.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Just to be very clear on this, so that I've been trying to keep notes. So the third paragraph of the motion on page 1, then, instead of saying low-cost supply, now reads the most cost-effective. Is that correct?
Did we agree that that's what the RES says?
Well, so the executive summary says one and the body says other, so maybe we can say low cost competitive supply.
Most cost-effective, low-cost supply.
The amendment is to the last paragraph on the first page.
No, I'm sure Donna understands it. She wanted to know what the language of Goal 5 was. I think we are going to have that out behind the building in the alley later.
All right, but just so when I vote on it, I know what I'm voting on, and I know which side I should bring the Band-Aids to.
The language in the RES.
Okay.
Whatever that happens to be. And it's very close to this language.
So it'll either be low-cost supply or the most cost-effective, but I think we need to know before we vote on it. So if I could just, I mean, we could put a slash, and we could say, and low-cost supply slash the most cost-effective, and then we've covered the executive summary and the language of the body.
That sounds like a good way to go about it.
Okay, I'm not sure who the maker of the motion was. If I could ask to amend that motion to include that language.
I was the maker of the motion.
Can
I
I
accept that
Will
amendment?
you accept that amendment? Moving on the fourth paragraph, just to be sure that this language has also been added, the very last line that's actually underlined, neither is consistent with the full set of goals and guiding principles. I believe that had been added in. The next paragraph where the word goes on, it says, we have evaluated in the CPUC's, and before EIR would be a D place for draft, and then again in that last sentence of that same paragraph where a D would be added for draft. And then that was it?
That's the motion.
And I got the very last one, and then the back page drops off. Thank you, Gerald.
I would like to also make a motion to add a few things that I think that if you look at the draft EIR, it does not say, too many negatives here, it does not say that transmission is not necessary. It gives a ranking, but it does not say that.
No, it says, has evaluated energy resource strategy where increased transmission is not necessary. I certainly did that.
But nowhere in that draft EIR did it say that transmission was not necessary.
It doesn't say that either.
I think we're talking about the alternatives that were evaluated, so the in-region alternative.
And back to the discussion on, is there any project out there that could meet all the goals? I'd like to make a motion that would change paragraph 4 at the beginning of where we start neither is consistent with the full set of goals and so on. That we add both projects may be consistent with goal 5, but neither are consistent. And then my motion also would be to strike paragraph 5 because we're really talking there that is transmission necessary? I'm not sure we can make that determination yet.
Is there a second to today's motion? Second. Okay. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand.
Wait one second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have one quick question. Okay, it's a little scratched up by now. Can we get the last paragraph you read to us?
Sure.
Okay, right now we're just voting on the amendment.
Right, the amendment.
Okay, as proposed and
okay.
seconded.
All right.
And then Brian, by memory, will give you a nice clean recitation. Oh, we're doing something wrong. You don't? Oh, what do you? Don't vote on it. Take back all your votes on all the amendments.
If you're making minor word changes to a motion, that's known as an amended motion, and you get approval from the person who made the motion and seconded it to make the change. If you're making a substantive or dramatic change, then it is a substitute motion. And on a substitute motion, you're voting, you do a separate vote on the substituted motion. Okay?
Then if it passes, that's it, right?
Then if it passes, that's it. If it doesn't, then you go back to the motion as it stood before. Okay?
And may I ask, so the maker of the motion then has the ability to accept or reject the language that is recommended. So the last recommended motion change is really up to the chair who made the motion to determine if he wants to accept it. So he can accept it or not.
Not accept it because I'd like to have a vote on the original motion. And now, as Rebecca requested, what you want just the last paragraph read, or you want the whole thing?
No, just the last paragraph.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. In this case, the SANDAG Energy Working Group recommends that in conveying a recommendation to the CPUC, that the project representing the most efficient use of resources, value to ratepayers, and that has the minimum impact on community health and environment be accorded a higher priority
Okay, that is the motion. I call the question. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And all opposed?
Port abstains.
So what was the, it was something to 1.
10 to 5 to 1.
CCSC abstains. Epic abstains. Oh, 3 abstentions.
And for
UCSD
there's no
abstains.
way that any of us representing a public university can vote on any of these things, so we have to abstain.
So how many abstentions? All right, who's abstaining?
6 abstentions.
Just a point of information, those abstentions would abstain under any circumstance of any motion, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
So they're
At
not
least
abstaining for any objection to this motion, but abstaining because their affiliation.
CCSE provides staff support to the committee. It would be unseemly for us to.
Well, and it's not so much that it would be unseemly, but there's no authority.
Congratulations.
That concludes.
Hold on just a moment. There are, we have to have a majority of votes to pass this motion. According to
Yes,
the rules.
I understand there are 22 voting members present. That's correct. In order for an item to pass, you need a majority of the voting members that are present to pass.
Then I would ask the members of the committee that aren't going to vote, please leave the room so you're not present, so we can actually vote on it.
That's all the problem. Well, how many total voting members are there? 25. Then you'd need at least 13 to stay.
So those who are abstaining could leave, and we could have them leave one by one to see where we end up, so we can get a vote on that.
I think to get this vote down. 15 voting.
So who are the voting members? If the voting, what I would ask then is, the people who voted need to stay. The people that didn't vote should leave, and then we have 15, right?
I don't see how many abstain, so
Abstentions have departed. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Art, please raise your hand. The motion is precisely the same motion, but being taken by an acceptable body.
Is that your hand or is that?
10 in favor, opposed? 5. Okay?
I would like the attorney to confirm that by having them leave the room, that changes, once, even though they were here for the meeting, that just by leaving the room, you change the number?
that's correct.
not here.
What's the final vote? Final vote is 10 in favor of the motion, 5 against. I will take this to the Regional Planning Committee next week. If you're among the 5 who were in the minority, and wish me to express opinions about the minority, which of course I will do, but if you want them to be your words, please bring them to me. Thank you all very much.